Nearly 6 months into his second term, President Trump's political power and grip on the GOP seems as strong as ever, perhaps even stronger. His pressure campaign of threats and assurances to get reluctant Republicans to support his sweeping bill paid off. And he says getting those no's to vote yes came easy and with no strings attached, he says.
No deals, no deals. What I did is we talked about how good the bill is. I mean, that's a deal, I guess, when you think about it. But obviously convinced him. But it was not hard. This is a great bill.
While the president says no deals were made on the House side, Alaska's Lisa Murkowski definitely got some major concessions for her crucial yes vote in the Senate. And there's Republican tension over the influence of those House Republican holdouts who, despite their fierce criticisms, well, they voted for the bill anyway.
They called their own bluff. How many times have they done this? I mean, I've been in Congress for 2 years and 5 seconds, and they pulled the same stunt 19 times. So they're over. The influence of the Freedom Caucus is over.
Why did you change?
Because we got a package that I think would have turned out better than what we would have gotten had we sent this bill back.
But is that
Senate.
caving?
Winning is caving? Well, if winning is caving, then I guess we caved.
My source tonight was once a key holdout against President Trump's 2017 tax cut bill, former Republican Senator from Arizona, Jeff Flake. Senator, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me on.
So you, of course, voted yes to the 2017 tax cuts in the end after being a key holdout. Would you have voted yes on this bill?
No. This, in terms of fiscal responsibility, this is just beyond the pale, I think. When you look at what it does over the next 10 years, adds $3 trillion, 3.4 trillion, I think CBO estimates. And that, we have to realize, is in addition to the 20 or so trillion that we will already add to the debt during the next 10 years. So that's just a small portion of what we're going to be adding. So it's just amazing to see this done with Republican control of both the House and the Senate.
As I'm sure you're familiar, the Republican response to that statistic, the CBO, the nonpartisan CBO estimates, is consistently, we're going to grow our way out of it. We're going to have so much economic growth, tax revenues will rise, and that'll zero out the numbers. Are they misleading when they say that?
Well, I'm a supply side as the next guy. I believe that you can't have dynamic scoring and do better, but not that much better. It depends on which taxes you cut. Obviously, capital gains tax cuts tend to have a better effect in terms of paying for themselves. But just extending the current tax cuts, I don't think you can argue that you're going to make it all up in growth. Certainly, there's going to be some growth. I think the regulatory changes in this legislation bode well for the economy. There are some things that will bode well, but in the end, still, it is quite fiscally irresponsible.
Senate Republicans pushed off the most severe Medicaid and food stamp cuts until after the 2026 midterms, which would seem to acknowledge that they know those cuts are damaging for voters here. Will Republicans eventually pay politically for those benefits cuts?
Well, once people have a benefit in whatever form, I remember Barack Obama with the Affordable Care Act. He told people that if you have insurance, you can keep it, you can keep your doctor and whatnot. And in the end, people couldn't. And Democrats paid a huge political price. I assume here, people who have insurance through Medicaid, you can make all the arguments you want about work requirements and whatever else, but people who have care and then lose it are not going to be happy about it. So I think there will be a price to pay. I think Tom Tillis and others looked at that pretty carefully and were concerned about it.
You heard a congressman there say that the Freedom Caucus is in effect over, and one can understand his point, at least on principle, right? That here you have a group of a couple dozen House Republicans who said, you know, more debt shall not stand, and here we are, more debt. I mean, does debt matter to this Republican Party?
It's tough to argue that it does. I mean, when you pass a bill like this, when you're in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, and to try to argue that you're fiscally conservative, that's just that dog don't hunt anymore. So it's really difficult to see. And I just, if you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it? And we aren't facing a big calamity in terms of COVID spending or anything else that has to go on. If you can't cut the deficit here, then you're just not going to do it.
Final question, if I can. In this bill, a real effort to take away really any green energy subsidies, which has been a real target of this president's. As you know, the leading economy in renewable energy and EVs, et cetera, is becoming China more and more. And I wonder, do you find that attack, in effect, on renewable energy, green energy projects, et cetera, will ultimately be to the detriment of the U.S. economy?
Well, you got to find a balance here. Obviously, you don't want to cede that ground to China completely in terms of solar panels and renewables. And so I think that we've done well in terms of research and seeding these industries. But of course, at some point, they've got to stand on their own. You can't continue through industrial policy to subsidize certain parts of the economy and not others. So this is a tough one. You just have to find the right balance. We'll see if they did here.
Senator and I should say Ambassador Jeff Flake, thanks so much for joining us tonight, and a happy 4th to you and your family.
To you too.
I want to bring in now two deeply sourced White House insiders, Semaphor's Shelby Talcott and Politico's Dasha Burns. Good to have you both on tonight. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
So Dasha, first to you. Trump set this July 4th deadline, which seemed a bridge too far until even a few days ago, right? And yet he got this across the finish line, and those holdouts, most of them disappeared. What did it take to get this done?
Well, there was a lot of skepticism that this was going to happen by July 4th. I will tell you, though, that the people closest to the president, the most senior staff in the West Wing, time and again said to me, this is going to happen by July 4th. Just wait, just watch. And indeed it did. And part of that confidence came from what they believed the president could do to push some of these holdouts over the finish line. I've reported today with my colleague Megan Messerly that President Trump spent 20 hours on and off on the phone using what one source described as both carrots and sticks with lawmakers, basically trying to address some of their concerns, saying we'll do things via executive order to remedy some concerns, but also making examples of folks. And you saw what happened with Senator Tillis, and there's no coincidence about the announcement of a massive war chest that the president has to influence the primaries. He announced that recently, and that was a plan to make sure that people knew where the power stood. And now the White House really does feel like they have the wind at their backs, and you're seeing that on display in Iowa tonight.
Yeah, I mean, we heard the president earlier in the broadcast say there were no deals. Fact is, been a lot of reporting that there were deals. But Shelby, I wonder, in your reporting, was it more carrot or more stick, more threats, more you will get primaried if you don't vote for this?
I think it was certainly a little bit of both, but I do think in this situation there was a lot of charisma being used by the president. He held meetings throughout the week. As Dasha said, he was talking to lawmakers a ton over the past few days on the phone, and really trying to entice them. You know, the New York Times earlier reporting that he was sort of giving out memorabilia during one of these meetings. And that, I think people forget how charismatic the president can be, and also the relationship that he has with lawmakers. He's so close with some of these lawmakers, and that's a really unique situation for a president to be in oftentimes, and he really used that to his advantage. And I think the combination of the president sort of using these carrots, but also these lawmakers seeing what happens when some of these folks go against the president, how he will very quickly hop on Truth Social, and you might wake up to a negative post or somebody threatening to primary you. That combination made it very difficult for Republicans to ultimately vote against this bill.
Yeah, listen, fear has worked for this president.